Good morning, Key Stage 3. It's Mrs. Warnock today. I hope you benefited from the time you were given last week to catch up on some of the work in your subjects. This week, what we are going to do is move to the end of the project you've been involved in over the last few weeks. And it is time to film your final performance. So far you have been considering how to redraft your work, and each week we've been looking at a different aspect, whether that's been facial expression or your voice. Now remember, there are 3 performance skills in drama when you're doing a practical performance. We have voice, movement and facial expression. So we appreciate that when you're in front of a camera, which is where you are because you're at home and you're filming these at home, there's not as much room to be considering movement. You could think about gesture, I guess. So I reckon what we are focusing primarily on will be vocal skills and facial expression whenever we are performing these for our final draft. So that's the feedback that you're looking at. So as you come to redraft these performances, and remember you performed these, some of you, I know when I was giving feedback to some of my classes, they were near perfection, so you have very little to do. For some others, there's a little room for improvement. So it's really, really important that you take on board the teacher's feedback and also evaluate your own performance. So what do we mean when we use the word evaluate? You hear these words thrown about all the time: analysis and evaluation. So what do we mean by that? Well, really, to evaluate something is to measure its worth. How important is it? How good is it? How bad is it? How would you improve it? And what it demands is thought. So sometimes when you just do a task without giving it very much thought, you see very little improvement. And so what we are asking you to do today is to engage in thinking and taking time to consider the feedback that we've given you and to actually judge your own performance in terms of what's good and what's bad. And it's really important to be able to self-evaluate and to step back and look at what you're doing and be able to measure what is good and what could be improved. So we want you to evaluate, because that's a really important skill to have in drama, because you might over the next year or two be asked to evaluate a live performance or evaluate something specific in terms of like lighting or sound, or it could be acting. So it's really important that you are able to recognize what is successful and what isn't successful on stage. And you're doing that at the minute by actually evaluating your own performance. So you're building skills so that you can, by evaluating your own performance, that will help you to evaluate other performances and other aspects of theatre. So your assignment, in preparation for this week's task, what we want you to begin to do is evaluate your own work to date. And that is everything that you've handed in for us so far. And what we want you to think about, and you could note this down, get a piece of paper, do it on your phone, your iPad, whatever you happen to have to hand. Watch your performance, look at our feedback, okay? It's really important. I know I give feedback and sometimes people don't even bother looking at it, but it's really important to note what we have said, particularly in some of the weeks where we said we're going to focus on one particular skill, whether it be voice or whatever. Look at our feedback, particularly in voice. What did you need to improve? So go back and look at the feedback. Watch your performance. I know it's really hard to watch yourself, but go back, watch yourself, take the feedback on board and write down on the page, this is my strength. So don't change it if it's a strength, you're doing it well. But if there's an area of weakness or an area that needs to improve, well, look at your teacher's feedback and also think to yourself, what can I do to improve? That's the first stage. We then want you to think about characterization. I have an extra N there. Let's get rid of that. I want you to think about characterization, and that means the character that you're playing. How true are you to that character in terms of how you're communicating your role when you are performing? Are you really true to that character, or are you actually moving away And, sometimes people are just reading lines and they're nothing like the character at all. So I know sometimes that can be nerves. But what I really want you to think about is, if I'm playing a police officer or if I'm playing a reporter, how confident am I? Am I upset? Am I happy? How are you conveying that when you're performing? Is it a very authentic, and that means truthful? Am I convinced by your performance? Do I believe you're that character? So I want you to think about your characterization. That's the character you're playing. And I want you to think, well, how have I, if I'm a police officer, how have I, or whoever you happen to be playing, I'm just using an example of a police officer. Police officer will use certain words and certain language, and they will not use an informal way of speaking. So if you've been doing that, you might need to change that slightly in your script. Think about how they would stand. They would stand with their shoulders back. They would not be afraid to make eye contact. They're quite confident. They wouldn't speak quickly. They would be trying to speak in a very measured way. They would try to appear very calm. And you need to take all of that into consideration when you are performing a certain role, because sometimes we can just read the lines without really thinking about who we are communicating on stage. So take a wee bit of time today to think, who is my character? How confident am I? And how can I communicate that on stage? What kind of language do I use? Am I being truthful to that? Where would my eyes be? Would I be making eye contact? Do I have a bit of an accent? Am I a jokey character? It's taking all of that into consideration when you are performing. The next thing that I want you to think about in terms of characterization is a specific moment. So maybe not even your whole performance. Take one particular moment. And what I'm asking you now, because this gives you an idea of you, in terms of, it makes you actually answer that question, do I understand my character? Am I being authentic? Because if you can't do this, then you need to go back to the drawing board. So can you be specific about what you did at a particular moment to have an effect on the audience and communicate effectively and to make an impact? Maybe you wanted to be funny and come across as that really silly character. Or maybe you wanted to show that you were really upset in a certain moment. I'm not even really thinking about what you guys are performing in particular. What I want you to think about is, did you have a real clear intention? And how well did you achieve that in performance? And this is the thing. If you can't do that, well, then you need to think a little bit more about what you can do to improve your performance. Because what that means is you're just reading the lines and you're not actually thinking about what you're saying or why you're saying them. So take a few of your lines and think about what you were trying to achieve when you said those lines. And if you don't have a clue, well, then you need to stop and take a wee bit of time to really consider that. And as soon as you can tell me that's my intention, then you've got it. And that will be clear in performance. Then I want you to think a wee bit about your vocal skills. And maybe again, take one or two lines from your script, watch your performance back, and look out for some of these things. Have you paused at certain points, and has there been a reason for it? Have you tried to emphasize something, or have you tried to be funny, or have you tried to make a point very clear? What about your tone of voice? Is that varied? And again, is that putting a certain intention across? Think about your change in pitch or volume. And what we're looking for here, watch your performance back. Because if you're just saying everything in monotone, that's not going to be engaging for your audience. You've got to really think about what you're saying and then communicate that carefully through changes in tone, through raising your pitch, through raising your volume or lowering your volume, whatever it might be. Think about how you're using your voice and be honest with yourself when you watch it back and go, actually, I'm just reading that off and it's not very convincing and I need to make a few changes. Look at our feedback. We will have told you if you needed to make some improvements. Are you able to comment on what this communicated to the audience about your character? Again, as before, if you can't, then you need to make those choices. Because I know when I'm performing something, if I raise my volume and somebody asks me why I do it, I know why I'm doing it. I know what the purpose is. So it's really important to always have intention, and that what I mean by that is that there's a reason for doing it. Mrs. Manson, I will say that to pupils sometimes when they're performing for us in the studio. If they walk across the room suddenly to another space, I'll say to them, why did you do that? And if they can't tell me why they've done it, or there's no reason for it, then I make them go back and think again. Or if they suddenly do something they haven't been doing, like raise their volume or whatever, I need to know why. And if they can tell me a reason why they're doing it and they can justify it, absolutely brilliant, then go for it. But if you're just doing things and not really thinking about it, and not really having a purpose or intention, sometimes it doesn't work on stage and it just looks like you're dancing and it looks like you're doing something without purpose. So make sure you always have purpose. And the last thing that I'm going to talk to you about is facial expression. It is so important to recognize that facial expressions are a really important aspect of body language and how you communicate. So when you're evaluating your own performance, you need to look at every aspect that contributes to your overall performance. And we're talking about getting into the finer details here. And that includes describing facial expression in detail and how they enhance the performance. And what is particularly great here is that you're acting for the camera. So your faces are really on display. Sometimes when you're in the studio, you can't see people's faces as clearly if they're far away, maybe the back of the studio. You have nowhere to run. You've nowhere to hide here. We can see your faces. And if you do nothing with them whatsoever, it's very telling. So you need to think about how facial expression, like your body language, can be heightened or exaggerated to make a character's intentions clear. I'm going to keep saying that word intentions today because I want you to think about acting with purpose. So, as I've said already, for this task, you have been acting for the camera. And that means that camera is recording every blink of your eye, every change in expression, we can see it. It's much closer and it's much more intimate than it is when you're in the studio. And that means you can reflect this in your acting style and your facial expressions. And you can actually be a wee bit more subtle as well because that camera is so close to you. And sorry, I've left a word out there. I think I meant to take that out altogether. Yeah, I think it was basically just that you can even show the camera is so close to you that you can actually even indicate a change of thought just by your facial expression. But I'm not going to ask you to do that right now. So for next Thursday, which is the 11th of March, what we would love you to do is to redraft. As I said before, for some of you, you have very little to do because we've been so impressed with these performances. For others, you may just have to add a little bit here and there to improve your performance and to refine your performance. Once you've done that, can you record it and post it to Google Classroom? And I've put at the very bottom, the last bullet point is editing. When we get back to school, we will edit all of this together. But in the meantime, the following week, which will be the 11th, the next lesson, we're going to start a completely new topic. So this finishes your plays. We haven't been able to do everything that we normally would do in school, and unfortunately that is just the way life is at the minute. We're sorry that you've missed out on a lot of practical drama this year. We cannot wait to get you all back in the classroom, up on our feet and really enjoying drama as we should be. But for now, this finishes this work on the set texts, and then next week we'll be starting something completely new. I hope this all makes sense, and I will speak to you all soon. Bye.